Hey guys, thank you for joining the Team Fearless call. I am very honored and excited to have Jay Marie. Is your last name Marie? Like, guess what your name is on Facebook, Jay Marie?
That's my middle name. Last name's Hain.
Hain? Okay,
Hain,
so.
like the socks or underwear.
Okay, Haynes. Okay, so Jay Haynes, or she goes by Trainer Jay on Facebook, come and speak to us. She reached out to me, I think it was several months ago, and just asked, because we're connected on Facebook, and she just said, you know what? I like your message and everything. Would you, if you ever would want me to speak to your coaches, I'd be happy to do it, because what she's seen is, first of all, she's an expert in pelvic floor. And can you explain real quick your credentials?
Okay, so I have a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Kinesiology, and I'm a personal trainer. I'm a Pilates Method Alliance Pilates instructor, bar instructor, a registered yoga teacher, an aerial yoga instructor, and I am a pelvic floor nerd. All those things. So I'm pre- and postnatal specialist, which has turned into pelvic floor nerd at its best. So.
Okay, so that's it right there, guys. I just took my Suburban to a guy who fixes transmissions on the street, because, guys, he is a transmission nerd. He knew how to take it apart. He drove it. He told me in 2 seconds what was wrong with that transmission. So that's why I'm real excited to have this lady, because she said, you know, she's seen a lot of moms come to her who needed repair because they were doing the Beachbody programs and they were going more intensely than they should have with the way that was stuff going on with their body. And she'll get into that. I'm not the expert there. But that if we could just know how to guide them, or at least be able for ourselves even to know how we can heal properly. Because once we've had, I know for some people it can happen with one kid. You know, a lot of us on our team have 5, 6, 7, 9 kids, and our bodies have been through a lot. So I'm really excited, Jay, to have you here. We're going to be having some of our friends and challengers and be sharing this call with them as well, because I think it's so important for moms to know exactly how we're supposed to be treating our body. So I'm going to hand it over to you. Go ahead, and you can go ahead and share your screen. And thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And I love talking about all things pelvic floor and helping out. And I love, again, your message and what you were sharing in your heart for fitness and helping people get active. But, you know, just being in the fitness industry for 18 years and hearing more and more from Beachbody, I was like, well, you know, there's got to be a way to work with you in some way and help your challengers do this in a way that is safe for them and not causing more harm, but is definitely taking them into the progressions of their fitness journey. So I have trying to figure out where the clock is on this thing, so I know what time I need to be done talking by. I'm going to talk really fast and with as little accent as possible. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'm going to share the screen, right? As soon as I figure out how to do that. Oh, and by the way, if you have children around, I will be speaking about parts that you may not want them to hear about. So you might want to plug in and listen to me from your little earplug thingies instead of letting your children listen to what I'm talking about, because we will be discussing parts that are important. So here we go, sharing the screen. Bear with me. Here we go. So I'm going to share the screen the best that I can very quickly. There we go. And we're going to present. And I'm going to hopefully go back. Okay. So, sorry, quick flash here. So I wrote a program called Core Restore. It's based off the research of some of my favorite people that you may have heard of, like Katie Bowman and that sort of thing, Julie Weeb. Like I said, just total pelvic floor nerdum. I have no idea if you can still see me or not, but hopefully you just see the screen here. But we're going to talk about core essentials. And I often will ask people what the core essentials are if they know their deep core 4 muscles. And they are actually the diaphragm, which most people don't think about. That's the foundation of the powerhouse. It's where your core stability begins. You also have your spinal muscles, definitely the multifidus group or multifidi. And then you have your transverse abdominis and then your pelvic floor muscles. Those are your actual core 4. The others are accessories. So your rectus abdominis, your obliques, The erector muscles and the glutes also are accessory muscles. And the glutes, they tend to lose mass a little bit, sometimes due to the misalignment in your tap, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. So if your glutes are losing mass, and maybe you even still kind of have like a lot of junk in your trunk, as they say, but it's kind of sagging south, that's a potential misalignment and pelvic floor issue that we'll have to address. So here's a little picture, just real basic of the pelvic floor, the diaphragm being at the top here. And then a transverse abdominis wraps around your core like a corset. The multifidi muscles or multifidus group are like little crocheted muscles that goes up your vertebrae, okay, which attaches there to the sacrum. So if you have a lot of sacrum pain or lower back, right above your gluteal crack pain during your period, this is maybe potentially part of the problem. But then so is this pelvic floor down here, as you can see attached there to the coccyx, it can pull, and then the pubic bone. So there's a lot of things we're looking at here in the pelvic floor. And then about the pelvic floor contraction, a lot of people think it's just belly button in, belly button in. But if you're just belly button in or holding your breath, you're constantly creating this tension that we see here, which then pushes down into the pelvic floor. So you see those downward arrows. That's an incorrect action. So just always holding the belly in, we create this bubble of pressure that goes into the pelvic floor. Now, if you think instead about wrapping that corset around your waist and pulling that belly button in and up, and that also will bring up the pelvic floor. But this cannot happen alone without the diaphragm, and the diaphragm being over here. This is kind of the king of the tap, the king of the internal air pressure. So that's something that we look at when we're training or choosing correct exercises for people who are having issues with diastasis recti or pelvic floor dysfunction, because this breathing mechanism is at the heart of regulating the internal air pressure for them. And I can go into more detail with that at some other point, but move along. So why should people care about their pelvic floor health? It supports your pelvis. Your lower back would definitely thank you for pelvic floor care. And your pelvic organs are supported by the pelvic floor muscles. So it literally holds your organs in and up, correct? And it's the strong foundation from the inside out. So as Michelle was sharing earlier, thank you for your transparency. If you're lifting, sprinting, jumping, sneezing, laughing, any of those things, and you're leaking, that of course can decrease your quality of life. It's commonplace, but not normal in the sense of you don't have to have that. It doesn't have to be accepted. It is commonplace, however, because we are going more and more towards high intensity interval training and other things. Hysterectomies are becoming very more commonplace, those sorts of things, C-sections. It is all contributing to some pelvic floor dysfunction. So pelvic floor muscles allow us to have a no shaky ground or sinking sand feeling. We feel secure and strong there in the lowest part of our torso. Postpartum recovery, because I know there's lots of moms out there, it begins in pregnancy. So some of you are like, well, I've already had 6, 7 kids, so too late for me. But we'll talk more about that, how that actually isn't too late for you. But for people who are going through Beachbody, and they get pregnant or they are pregnant, the postpartum recovery actually needs to start in pregnancy. It transfers to the postpartum recovery. And day 1 of the postpartum can begin a reconnection of the core and floor breathing exercises. So that's pretty important, actually. Postpartum can be forever. You can regain function years later. So I've helped women who are, my kid's 10, my kid's 27, and we can help you. The muscles are very resilient and can be trained to work correctly, even years later. OBGYNs are not exercise physiologists or kinesiologists, so their goal is to help you have a safe pregnancy and delivery and deliver that baby. But, my own doctor who did my hysterectomy last year was like, oh, I just tell my women to do, lots of crunches. And I'm like, no, please don't tell them that. So he's now on board with my program. We talked a lot of science and nerded and geeked out on each other. And so he now does not tell anyone to do lots of crunches to get their pre-baby abs back. And then we have the 6-week checkup. It's not your starting point. So you can actually start rehabbing 2 weeks postpartum for vaginal. This is with very gentle exercises specific to core and floor recovery. And then 3 to 4 weeks for C-sections. Diastasis recti, a lot of people hear that. It's called DR or DRA. It depends on which side of the ocean you're on. Australians call it one thing. Europeans call it another. We call it another. You know how it is. It's like metric versus. Anyway, so diastasis recti is extremely common, actually. It's 66% in the third trimester, 50% postpartum. It takes about 8 weeks of healing time if you are aware of it and prepared for it and start doing the correct exercises and avoiding ones that make the problem worse. You can have about 8 weeks healing time. I've seen that in a lot of my clients. I've been able to have my hands on right from the beginning. Diastasis recti is more about a muscle separation, but it's also about a tension disorder. So the gap itself is the interecti distance, and that's where you hear people talk about fingers between the rectus abdominis muscles and being able to basically touch someone's organs underneath those muscles. And 1 to 2 fingers. 1 finger is, okay, it's definitely a cautionary. 2 fingers, we definitely have work to do. Tension is also very important, and that's what I talk about a lot in Core Restore. I talk about, tension of your cheek versus the tension of the tip of your nose when you're palpitating that space during exercises. The focus is the tension and the healing. So to feel that linea alba, which is from your sternum to your pubic bone, start to get that tension back like a trampoline versus just a really weak, squishy line between your abdominals. During pregnancy, your goal is to prevent the diastasis recti from being worse than it needs to be. And during your postpartum period, it's to restore its tension and close the gap correctly. Binding and wrapping, I get that question a lot. I put irrelevant in my notes. There's a place for it in certain situations and cases, but it should not be a crutch. You want to train your muscles to work correctly. So if you do bind or wrap, it should be very temporary and for very specific cases. Surgery really should only be considered if you are 1 year postpartum and still having huge issues. You're done with childbirth, so no surgery for any of these things unless you're done with childbirth. There's a lot that can go wrong. And then, of course, you've tried a restorative programming with a certified trainer or physiotherapist who specializes in these sorts of things. So here's a little picture. I'm sure you've seen abdominals before, but that linea alba is that line from the sternum to the pubic bone. And it is then surrounded here, if you will, by the rectus abdominis, that 8-pack as we know it. And then that, of course, has other sheaths involved. So we have the serratus anterior, which are important. The transverse abdominis is way down deep, covered by the internal oblique, then the external oblique, and then here's all of this aponeurosis, okay, which acts like a basket weave, pulling our core in. So we want to increase the total tension of that basket weave of the aponeurosis versus having weak spots and over tight spots. All right, so this gets a little nerdy probably for most. I was teaching this over in Australia, so the instructors there knew about arcuate lines and that sort of thing. But if you just take a quick glance, you can see where this is above your belly button, so to speak. Let's just keep it simple. Above the belly button and below the belly button down here. And you can see where there's a lot of extra pulleys here, if you will. Okay, lots going on. And that's why our upper 4-pack tends to be a lot tighter. We can work that one better. And below, we have different things going on here with the transverse line, the transverse fascia, and other things going on. So that's why we have struggles with below the belly button line. But this is important to know the differences and how they're activated correctly to get that core that you want and that's strong and not being compromised by increasing this line, weakening the tension, or causing an inconsistency where this one's over tight and this one's not getting any work done to it. And now we have a core stability problem. So this is going into that a little bit more. It's just showing a cross cut of that so that you can see a little bit where the aponeurosis and the arcuate line is. And then here's a close-up of your aponeurosis. So if you see these basket weaves, okay, this is the external oblique and how they pull down. And in muscles pull, they don't push. So your external oblique want to pull the back in and make the waist look smaller from the back. The internal obliques do the opposite. And in our culture, the internal obliques are severely underworked. External obliques are overworked. And we end up with that inconsistency as well in the abdominals, which can cause undue tension or unnecessary tension here on this linea alba that goes down through this line, okay? So hopefully everybody's following along so far. I have no idea how to stop all this, so Michelle, if you have questions or see something I need to answer, let me know. So you're going to assess the DR. This is something you really should leave to somebody who knows what they're doing, but you can self-assess or start to just feel it out a little bit and then always work with somebody if you're not quite sure. But to assess the diastasis recti, your main points are to check halfway between your sternum, your breastbone, and your belly button. Check above and below the belly button, right above and below it, and then check halfway between the pubic bone and the belly button. Your knees should be bent as if you're getting ready to do a crunch. Your head down on the floor, hands behind your head, your ribs down and relaxed, and then you can act like you're doing a very gentle crunch, and you'll feel with your fingers, and you should run them width-wise, so finger edges should be lining up with the center of the rectus abdominis, so you don't want to go vertical, if you will, on that. And you want to measure with finger widths, and you check the tension. That's the main thing. So gap and tension are both important. Now, what does the pelvic floor do? Well, it gives you endurance. Okay, kind of in yoga, we talk about it being the mula bandha, which is a way to, if they say, lock the energy in to the bottom, so you're not having energy, they say, like seeping out of you. So there's 3 bandhas in yoga. So the mula bandha is the bottom, the pelvic floor. It gives you endurance. It keeps your energy in. It also helps give you strength. When you go to get something off of your kitchen counter or reach up into a cabinet, your pelvic floor is already being alerted by your body to hold you and keep your organs in. So it is working, whether you're familiar with it or not, but it can work better. It also releases and contracts, obviously, allowing for the flow of urine and for your bowels. It is obviously sexual function, birthing. And then we talked earlier about the wicker basket. So the pelvic floor also has its own pulleys, if you will. It's like a large funneled trampoline, the main muscle. And then around it are smaller muscles that kind of act as cording or hammocks that help pull that main muscle in and up, which are why Kegels or Kegels, however you want to pronounce it, are not as efficient as they should be. That's just one part of a bigger picture. So you want to think about your wicker basket again. You know, is it too tight in the front, too loose in the back, a little bit of both? Maybe it's just too tight, period, or too loose. And those are all options that we see, or I guess variables we see in the body, that sometimes people are too tight in the front, too loose in the back, vice versa, etc. So this is a picture. People don't realize that male, so I know I'm talking to a lot of moms out there, and a lot of challengers, and the people on Michelle's team are female, but I'm sure you also have males out there. I mean, Michelle's husband is doing all of this stuff too in Beachbody. So they also have a pelvic floor, and it's also at risk. They don't have babies, but if you think about part of the reason why pregnancy puts stress on the woman's pelvic floor is because as we increase in weight and we're carrying a baby, the linea alba is under stress. Our body's changing postural alignment, which also puts our linea alba and pelvic floor under stress. And we're carrying extra weight, which puts the pelvic floor under stress because there's extra weight, right? Well, for men who start to gain weight through their life, they put stress on their pelvic floor as well. Okay, so it's like they're gaining 20 plus pounds, et cetera, and they don't lose that weight. They don't have the baby per se. And so now they have this weight that's on the pelvic floor. Also, men are heavy lifters sometimes, or they like high intensity sports and exercise. And if they're not learning how to align their body correctly and breathe correctly, they are pushing down into this pelvic floor as well for them, just like we are. So pelvic floor, I have just as many male clients as I do female for pelvic floor dysfunction. And we'll talk more about what their symptoms are. But this is just a picture of what theirs versus ours look like. But yes, we all have pelvic floors. So moving on. let's go back to pregnancy a little bit. You guys know all about the hormones and things, I'm sure, but pelvic floor is affected by lots of things in pregnancy. Hormones, obviously one of them. The muscles, relaxin, it's not just for certain parts of the body. Relaxin goes through the entire body. So all the muscles are getting bendy and stretchy and loose, including the pelvic floor, especially the pelvic floor. You also have a progressive weight load, which we just spoke of. Trauma, like episiotomy, tearing, forceps needing used, vacuum, intense labor, C-sections, all of those are considered pelvic floor trauma. And then, of course, men, if they need prostate surgeries, any type of abdominal surgeries, hernias, that sort of thing, and weight gain. And then Kegels or Kegels, we'll just say Kegels for today, but it's pronounced on different sides of the pond, different ways. It's not effective when it's traditionally prescribed to just, pull everything in and up and hold it for 10 seconds. The pelvic floor muscles are not an all or nothing recruitment. You have to treat them as a whole system and a family. So if you think about your arm, if you just take a moment really quick and let your arm hang down by your side, like you're getting ready to pick something up, and say it's your purse, I don't know, and then you're pull it up and hold it up about halfway. And I want you to pretend like you're walking around throughout your day, holding your purse halfway up as if you were holding a 90-degree angle in your elbow. Okay. And then I want you to go around every so often, and I want you to pull up on your purse as much as you can in an arm curl and hold it there for like 10 seconds. And I want you to let it back down just a little bit. And then I want you to pull it up again and let it back down. So that's like a hypertonic or semi-tight pelvic floor trying to then engage. We'll talk about that more in a second. Now I want you to let your arm all the way down, let it hang down. And now I want you to work your bicep simply by tensing and squeezing your arm, but don't actually bend your elbow. Just squeeze your arm as it's straight beside you. That's a Kegel. Okay. So yeah, you'll get some muscle tone, if you will, but it's not really working your bicep or strengthening your arm as a whole. So we need to incorporate more into it than just Kegels. Now, tight does not equal restored. So some people are hypertonic or hyperspastic, and there is a difference clinically. Basically, that means they're too tight. Okay, so they have, say, lots of back pain, especially during periods. They have lots of sexual pain. They have very noisy flatulence. Those are just three of many symptoms of a hypertonic or hyperspastic pelvic floor. Lots of sacral pain or SI joint pain. So that's too much tone and an inability to activate correctly, okay, for a release, eccentric. Hypotonic is too loose, okay? That's where your organs want to start to slip south and fall out even potentially. That's also a dysfunction. So some people actually have both simultaneously, which makes it tricky for us to treat them, but it is possible. So some of the common symptoms: pelvic floor dysfunction, back and hip pain, incontinence, which means you're leaking when you're exercising, laughing, etc. Diastasis recti, which is the separation, and then pelvic organ prolapse, which I call POP. It's its acronym, is where your pelvic organs literally start to travel south. So we're going to talk about that a little bit because this is serious stuff. So people who ignore the warning signs of pelvic floor dysfunction, whether it's sexual pain, leaking, urine, bowel incontinence, you're really, really constipated, or you have the inability to control your bowels, they're very, very loose, those sorts of things. This is pelvic floor dysfunction. So this is what your organs should look like. Okay, your organs are supported. Here's your pelvic floor right here. And everything should be above that. Okay, bladder, uterus, and then of course your rectum. Down here is the slack muscle tone. So all of this starts to go south, and the bladder falls in. Okay, and you can see now where the vagina is affected, it can start to fall south. And then your rectum is huge here in the sense of now it's not just north of the anus, it is falling in as well this way. And so now we have bowel incontinence issues. And once you have these things, this is really, it's treatable. But I mean, it's like once it goes south, ladies, and maybe some gentlemen out there, it's definitely difficult. So we want to catch symptoms early and not exasperate them, because once you go here, this is definitely a whole other monster. Now, really quickly through this chart, and Michelle, let me know if I'm running low on time and I need to hurry it up even faster. But pelvic floor, so this is a frontal view. Things that you want to look for. Do you have irritable bowel syndrome? Okay, that's sometimes a pelvic floor dysfunction. Chronic constipation, anal itching, lesions, perianal eczema, all pelvic floor issues. Vaginal blood flow, if it's especially decreased. Recurrent vaginal yeast infections, recurrent bladder infections, all of those things point to pelvic floor. If your vaginal lubrication is decreasing, if you have pain or increased friction during intercourse, if your sexual pleasures declined, all of those things are pelvic floor dysfunction symptoms. Your pelvic floor is trying to communicate with you. All of those things. So these are things that we want to be looking at. Chronic IC, that one's, I just treated an older gentleman for chronic IC, very, very painful disease. And it's, pelvic floor dysfunction going horribly wrong. So how to restore function, things you guys need to look at as beach body coaches. First of all, we got to talk about alignment, and lots of alignment. Do you know what neutral spine means? Do you know how to find it in your body? Do your challengers know? Can you stand with your feet sit bone width apart? Are the railroad tracks of your knees lined up? Are your knees relaxed? Some people can't even put their kneecaps down. They can't relax their quads. That's a problem going on up in the pelvic bowl. Are your ribs stacked over your hips? If you're a rib thruster, that becomes an internal air pressure problem. We also talk about breathing a lot. So inhaling to inflate into the rib cage, not the front of it, but the whole, you think of your bottom of your rib cage like an umbrella. So when you inhale, your rib cage, the bottom rim of your rib cage should feel like an umbrella opening evenly, front, sides, and back. And as you exhale, that umbrella closes. And that takes a lot of practice for some people, especially if you have a lot of crazy, wonky breathing going on. We have to retrain some muscle memory there. Also, you want to send your pelvic floor some air as well. So some people belly breathe and stop at their belly, and it's not supposed to stop at your belly. And I know in yoga we say belly breathing a lot, but it's never meant to just stop at the belly button. It's supposed to go below it and kind of fill up the pelvic floor. So if you take an inhale right now, can you feel the space within your pelvic bowl expand? Does it feel like the tension between your pubic bone, sits bones, and tailbone is relaxing and filling with air? It should. And then as you exhale, you'll feel those four corners, we call them, kind of draw in and up gently. So if you're not feeling that, then we should talk some more. And then connecting your core to that. So when you can master the release of your pelvic floor, meaning you can feel it inhale and inflate, and then exhale, engage, that's when you start to add more contraction and more work. If people can't feel their pelvic floor move and they can't feel their breath move, they probably should not be adding any resistance until they practice that for a little bit. So some cues we use are jellyfish. If you think about your rib cage looking like a jellyfish, opening and closing, same for the pelvic floor. Kleenex box, talk about pulling a tissue up out of the box. You should have that same feeling in your pelvic floor. When you exhale, it's like the vulva are pulling, like that tissue. You're pulling that tissue up out of the box. You should have that same feeling in your pelvic floor. So those are, and the double accordion is a little complicated, so I won't get into that tonight, but that is a way that we teach proper core and pelvic floor breath patterns. So exercising, some of the basic rules I start, especially for my people who are doing high intensity or lifting. Expand, exhale, exert, or AKA blow before you go. So expand means inhale and expand your rib cage, especially in the back, expand your pelvic floor, fill your body with air, and then you're going to exhale and exert. So a lot of people will squat, but the most that I hear their exhale is at the top of their squat, when really it should be blow before you go. And this is for all exertion. So you want to think about before you even begin that pump or that hard work or that lift, you want to actually exhale and regulate the air. And of course, our goal here is to be automatic about it. And that's the practice part. That's the hardest part. People aren't think about this hard at first. Okay. So some of the things your body may not like, and you have to watch this. I'm semi-familiar with Beachbody workouts, but do I have it memorized? Absolutely not. But here are some things we want to think about. So intra-abdominal pressure. How is the air moving from the rib cage to the pelvic floor? That's what really brings you core stability. And this is trouble with pressure for a core that cannot be cued. So like even tonight, I've had people in my Pilates classes on the reformer, and I took the little 2-pound sand balls and I put the sand balls on their belly buttons as they were on their back. And I made them do some of our most basic movements, but they weren't allowed to lose that ball. That ball had to stay on their inhale, and on the exhale, it should travel in and up a little bit, like towards the rib cage, and inhale, stabilize again. Everybody those balls were rolling all over the place because they're still learning how to truly activate their deep core and not compensate through other movements. You have to manage the air pressure. Your body is like a balloon. And if you're constantly just squeezing in the middle of your core, thinking belly button in, clench the core, suck in, brace, it pushes so much pressure down into the pelvic floor. So it's really learning how to use the entire core as like a piston approach to the breath. You want to avoid crunches. I'm so sorry, but no crunches really. In fact, there's way more things that we can do that are entirely more efficient than a crunch to get your abdominals strong. Sit-ups are also pelvic floor nightmare, especially for people who are struggling with pelvic floor issues. Jackknives and all of those things. When your belly button starts to bulge up towards your pants line instead of scoop in and up away from your pants line, there is a problem. And then craning necks, huge red flag for people in deep core. You should not have to crane your neck. If you are, you're no longer using your core correctly. You're compensating into other things and causing a lot of internal air pressure issues. Now, this one's a big one. I get a lot of people like throwing tomatoes at me when I say avoid running. But sorry, if you do have pelvic floor dysfunction, you want to avoid running and anything like it until you have healed up. Once you have healed up, you can begin running again, but with a lot of attention to what's going on within your body and knowing that you're going to have to start back in at a nice pace so that you're not blowing out your pelvic floor. In the past 2 years, I can't tell you how many women have come to me who were avid runners and who were like, yeah, I was in the shower one day and just like my pelvic organs fell out. Oh my gosh. So running is definitely an internal air pressure stressor, but done right, you can run. And I had a hysterectomy last year, a medical one, and they kept my ovaries, but they took the uterus. And even myself, I've done this homework myself, and almost put myself out of my own job because I didn't want to listen to the doctor so much. And I had to like really eat humble pie and go back and do my own homework. And still to this day, have to watch. Like my daughters wanted to start running a little bit. And so we start out nice and slow, and I listen to my body and I watch my internal air pressure and breathing and all those things and take it easy a little bit with that as we start back in. So things like that. Rowing is a great way to get the runners high without the pelvic floor pressure, and also work on your postural alignment, which will only make your core and floor stronger. So I love rowing. I have a rowing machine at my house and have had for 15 years. So rowing is awesome. Overhead lifting should be avoided while you're dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction if you have POP, pelvic organ prolapse, or diastasis recti. Overhead lifting is only going to make matters worse. There's no way around it. Also, you want to avoid push-ups unless they are really modified, and I can let you guys know all about that. Planks, sorry ladies, I know planks are like a huge one. Planks, though, should be checked by a professional. If you really, really love planks, you need to have your DR checked while you're in a plank, because for some people, we actually find that planks help their DR, but we know that planks are not very friendly towards the pelvic floor. So 10-second rule. So if you're like, say, trying to get to a 4-minute plank, forget that. Don't ever do that again, please. Instead, do as many rounds as you can, say in 4 minutes, because we know scientifically now that the pelvic floor is like checking out after 10 seconds. Even if your arms and the rest of your body can hold it, I can hold a 5-minute plank, but scientifically now I know the evidence shows that even though everything else in my body can hold that plank for 5 minutes, my pelvic floor is out of there. It's like, sorry, done, checking out of this hotel. And so now when I want to do plank stuff, I'm moving through it with my breath or doing 10 seconds, coming out of it, going back in. And that's how we have to modify that now based on the science. Conventional deadlifts are also a huge gravitational pressure on the front of the pelvic wall. So that's also something that you're going to have to modify until you're healed up, and then you can go back to them. The body loves neutral spine, but know that everyone's neutral is a little bit different. So if you have lumbar issues, fusions in the lumbar spine, or you have scoliosis, your neutral spine is going to look a little bit different from your neighbors. And that's something else that you probably should have assessed by someone who does postural assessments and can tell you what that should look like for you. But the posture stacked, rib cage over the abdomen, over the hips, and there's a lot more to that, but there's the basis of it. And then stability. If you do need to lift, try to lift sitting down. I love stability balls for that reason. So if you have lifting in your program and you're having DR or pelvic floor issues, you should be sitting on that stability ball. It gives great feedback on what's going on in the pelvic floor while you're lifting. Strength, working your core safely in all planes of motion. You want to, again, think about that balloon. Are you holding your breath? If you are, if you're holding your abs in and up all the time, then your pelvic floor is really working hard trying to restabilize the pressure, and it becomes inefficient and transfers pain elsewhere to the hips, to the knees, even as low as the feet or up to the shoulders and up the neck. I've had people who have had huge shoulder pain, and it ends up being, once we deal with their pelvic floor, the shoulder pain goes away. Also, overtrained abs can result in a bulging belly. Anyone out there like, oh my gosh, I keep doing all this stuff, and I still have this mommy tummy, or I still have like a really firm upper four pack, but my underneath my belly button is just like I'm bloated or something. That is an internal air pressure problem. Overtrained abs with the wrong pressure ends up with pelvic pain, constipation, vaginal pain, sexual pain, etc. And then also diaphragm and pelvic floor recruitment, that will lead to stability and recruited isolation. So activate correctly, and that will make you more stable and more strong. So when can I plank and crunch again? You guys are like, hold on, we're in the middle of a 21-day challenge, or we just started it. You're telling us we can't plank and crunch. Well, there are modifications around it if you need to do exercises like that. But when your diastasis recti is restored, then you have tension in the linea alba. If you have no pelvic prolapse, kiss those things goodbye, please. If you can do it without your belly bulging, if you can do it without pelvic pain, not just during, but a couple of days after, pay attention to that. If you have this all of a sudden, like, gosh, my back hurts, pay attention to that. And then no leaking. So that's when you can return. But trust me, planking is awesome. But there are modifications to do so that you're not getting any of these problems. Crunching, there are also different exercises to do that are so much more efficient. There are safer options. Okay, so core restore, like my particular program, but regardless, even if you don't do that program, you want to give yourself at least a good 12 weeks to really restore your core and floor. And there are daily exercises that can be done. I have people that use them as a dynamic warm-up, and then I have other people in other fitness levels who use them as their workout period because of just where their fitness level is. But your goal in core restore is to recruit your core properly, to improve your posture, to strengthen your pelvic floor, to lift your glutes back up, and then manage your pelvic organ prolapse. So if you do have pelvic organ prolapse, we can help make it better and help it go back up north a little bit, so you can hopefully reduce your need for surgery, if not eliminate it. You do not rush back into intense activity if you've been diagnosed with diastasis recti, pelvic floor dysfunction, or POP. And know that the first two, diastasis recti and pelvic floor malfunction or dysfunction, can and will lead to pelvic organ prolapse if left untreated. And then, of course, 4 to 6 months here for total restoration is advisable. So always being on the alert for wise modifications to do during a 4 to 6 month period to make sure that you are truly building your stability, and knowing that occasionally life throws you a curveball and you have to maybe revisit this program again in the future because you hurt your back, or you were in a car accident, or you went on a really long road trip and now your back hurts and your posture's all off. And so it's just something you can always bring back into your life whenever needed. And then here's a little comic for you to finish. Squeezing those knees together, that's a great thing. So here's Jill. She's keeping fit and doing her regular pelvic floor exercises. So there's definitely more exercises to be had for pelvic floor strength, but I'm sure we can all relate a little bit, having kids and being moms, that sometimes this is our favorite go-to exercise. So there you have it. I'm going to stop the share, Michelle, I think.
Wow. I want to do that exercise. Oh my gosh, so there's so much discussion while you're talking. Guys, if you can, if you have.
Wow, 39 chats.
Lots of chats. If you have any questions specifically for Jay, put them in the chat, or take a second here in a minute to just start speaking. But one of the questions I had, you showed the image of the pelvic floor connecting to the tailbone. Is that right?
Yes.
So if your tailbone's broken, does that mean that your pelvic floor, and it's never been healed, your pelvic floor is going to be weaker?
Okay, so it doesn't literally attach to the tip of the coccyx, but it does attach up into points of the sacrum. Okay, so that's a generic picture, but the sacrum's like this weird, I call it the stink bug bone, because it looks kind of like a weird stink bug there between your bones. Okay, so it has many points and many nerves, and the pelvic floor does connect up and into it. If you've broken anything in your hips, anything, I talk about the hips being like the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay. And it's the powerhouse of the whole body. And so if you've broken anything, coccyx, SI, lumbar, fusions, anything rocking your hips, it's like something, an earthquake has hit the Golden Gate Bridge. And so now we need the engineers to come back in. We need to fix the pillars that go into the bay. We need to fix the road that was paved across. We need to fix the cables and the suspension. All those things take a place. So yeah, if you've broken anything in your hips or had any kind of hip surgery, then pelvic floor restoration is probably highly advised.
Now, would the pelvic floor affect how your spine curves in the back, like whether it's tighter or looser?
More the spine will affect the pelvic floor. But interesting question, because for instance, like when I had my hysterectomy, there's 4 major ligaments, right, that attach the uterus. So you have the big round ligaments that are in the front, and then you have the sacral ligaments, which hold the uterus in place, like rigging from the back of the uterus to the sacrum. So when you have a hysterectomy, they go in and they cut those 4 cords and then they take the uterus away, right? I had tons of sacral pain during my periods, because my uterus was getting enlarged. I had something called adenomyosis, and it was pulling, and my uterus was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was pulling forward on my sacral ligaments. So literally my pelvic floor and my uterus were pulling my sacrum forward every month, causing excruciating pain. They took the uterus and all that out. My sacrum was able to fall back in where it was supposed to be, and then I had to do my own pelvic floor therapy work for months, and still am doing a lot of the work sometimes. Like, you know, now that I'm running again lightly, I went in right away and did some of my core restore exercises. So I knew that my hips fell back in where they should be, because that was new to them for the first time in a year, and make sure that I settled things back in where they should be, so that I wasn't waking up the next day with any pelvic floor pain, or in weeks to come start peeing myself. So
okay, thank you. Rebecca Huff is asking if you adjust the tailbone.
If you adjust the tailbone?
You should have the tailbone adjusted, I guess, if you're having issues, or...
That is one facet. So if it is definitely a skeletal issue, you know, chiropractor can see that, and so they can adjust that. Or like today I was talking with some of my clients, because you can have your sacrum within the SI joint where the sacrum meets the hip bones. It can shift, it can nutate and counter nutate. And for some people it will do nutation, and some people will do counter nutation. And then for other people, you can literally get like this rotational shift where on one side, maybe you're pushing forward, on one side it's trying to slide back, or vice versa. And so a chiropractor can definitely see that, and they can move the bone, but then it's up to someone who's into the muscular world, right, to go in and help you build the muscular balance to then hold that adjustment in place, right? And some people don't have to go to the chiropractor because, yes, we can work different muscle groups within that sacrum and SI joint and hip bowl to get that to move without the chiropractic adjustment, but then you still have to train those muscles to work correctly to hold it.
Okay.
So it doesn't move again.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's
Popping out.
a lot of great information. Like I'm going to have to rewatch this to absorb some of it, but it's so good. So one person was asking, Carmen was asking, what are the proper exercises like yoga? Don't you have like a website on your website? Don't you have some sort of a program people can do through video to fix this?
I do. So yeah, I'm a yoga instructor, Pilates instructor, exercise trainer, all that. But I do have Core Restore, which is a 12-week program. But when I say 12 weeks, it means that for 12 weeks, you get an email delivered to your inbox. But for some people who are doing it, that 12 weeks is really becoming 12 months because maybe they have full-out pelvic organ prolapse, or they have a grade 4 pelvic floor dysfunction, or they just had surgery. So the work's going to be more intense for them. That first week, it needs to really be a whole month. But you get 12 emails. It's a 45-minute video for each. I'm sorry, I'm getting back here. And then you also get worksheet. So you get to check off what you do.
Okay.
And then
specific
to me.
Yeah, specific.
And 160 exercises. So to answer that, there's 160 exercises in my Core Restore program that build one upon the other. So it starts very basic, and then you can build upon them. And by the end, you're doing kind of like a high intensity workout that is pelvic floor and diastasis safe. So you learn a lot of modifications in the Core Restore program.
Awesome.
That are safe.
Awesome. All right, guys, it is already almost 10 o'clock. So if you have more questions that haven't been, we'll stop you from peeing yourself.
Yes.
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 Yes, I know it's such a hard, but if you have any other questions for Jay, she is my friend on Facebook, so you can either find her, it's Jai Marie is what her name is on Facebook, or you can connect with her on J Fitness, right? Coach.
It's trainerj.com.
.com.
Yep, and if they have fitness questions or Core Restore questions, it's best to reach me through my fitness business page, which is Trainer J. Or Instagram, Twitter, I'm on all of them as Trainer J, and that's the best place to reach me. Of course, an email, j@trainerj.com, and then I have all of that's on the website, trainerj.com. You can find all of those outlets on the website and my blog.
Thank you so much. You can totally tell you're a pelvic floor nerd. I used to be IT nerd or Linux nerd, so I totally get the nerd thing. But it's a good thing. I love it because you know what you're talking about. So guys, if you have any questions for Jay, please reach out to her. She's amazing. She just wants to help, especially if you have any friends or other challengers who are working and working out maybe too hard after having a baby, or they're having major pelvic floor issues. I have heard story after story, especially I know there's a lot of Catholic moms in this on Team Fearless. Not everyone is, but a lot of Catholic moms with a lot of kids. And I've heard story after story of women whose insides have fallen out. So by prevention and figuring this stuff out now, hopefully we can keep that from happening to us or help someone else who is struggling. So thank you so much, guys. Yes, Carmen, that's right. It's exactly what I was talking about. Exactly. Thank you so much, Jay, for coming on our team call. That was so super informative.
A lot to digest right before bed.
Exactly. And I see a couple of guests on the call too. So my friends. Oh, hi, Tina. But thank you guys for coming on the call. If you know someone you'd like to share the call with, please, if you're not on the team page, reach out. I will get you the link. But let's help each other out, all right? Hope you guys have an awesome day. We will see you next week on the team call.
Thank you.